Just Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Wissam Osman, the coordinator of Toward Violence-Free Homes, one of the Coalition of Muslim Women (CMW) programs. Our goal of this program is to provide public education about issues that concern our community members. To know more about Toward Violence-Free Homes or CMW, different programs and services, please visit our website, cmw-kw.org. You'll find that website in the chat box. And also, if you have any question, please send me an email. My email is wissam.osman@cmw-kitchener-waterloo.org. Also, you're gonna find that email in the chat box. Today is the third of 4 family law information sessions. Next week is going to be the last session of this series that will be in English. Those sessions are provided by by the partnership between Muslim Legal Support Center and the Coalition of Muslim Women. The Muslim Legal Support Center provides free legal advices and connections to Muslim lawyers from like a different specialties. Sorry for that. For more information, please visit the Muslim Legal Support Center website, where you'll find it in the chat box as well. I would really love to thank lawyer Lina for her time and information to facilitate these sessions, and also for all other lawyers who are going to be providing same information in different languages, which is Urdu, Arabic, and Somali. That's going to be starting soon. First session of the Urdu information session will start tomorrow. Arabic sessions will start October 15th. Somali sessions will be starting on October 29th. One last thing that I need to mention is the primary audience for these sessions are Muslims, although the information provided will be helpful for racialized community as well. We understand that this information will be helpful for the service providers. We welcome that and are happy to facilitate this knowledge transfer. The only caution we would put forth on that aspect is that the primary audience has lived experience and has a lot of backgrounds on these issues. For the service providers and others who do not have the lived experience, we urge you to seek more knowledge to understand the complexity in this issue. We say this because we are concerned that without that holistic context, there may be some unintentional harm on those who are served. CMW has trainings and programs that provide that deeper context. Please, if you have any questions or concerns, or you can contact me at my email, wissam.osman@cmw-kitchener-waterloo.org. Sorry for the long opening of this session tonight. Now I would like to ask lawyer Lina to start her presentation. Thank you so much. Lina, you're muted.
I knew that would happen at least once. So thank you. Today we're going to be talking about immigration and marital status. So we're going to be talking about the effect of foreign divorces and foreign marriages primarily. So just a note, as I do each time, that this presentation is going to give you a lot of legal information. It is not legal advice. And the idea of getting legal information is to help you identify what issues you have so that you can seek out a lawyer and better know what you're going to ask them when you do seek their actual advice that is specific to your scenarios. The distinction between legal information and legal advice is that it's not specific towards your scenarios, right? So we're going to go through a lot of exercises and hypotheticals, and hopefully it's going to be really meaningful for you to understand how the law operates. So the agenda today, we're going to first start with getting divorced outside of Canada. We're going to talk about some of the family law consequences and how you know whether or not Canada is going to even recognize a divorce that is granted in a country outside of Canada. When we're talking about getting divorced outside of Canada, it's mostly going to apply to Canadians who are already married within Canada. And then we're going to talk about getting married outside of Canada. And we're going to do that twice. First, we're going to talk about it with respect to Canadians who are getting married outside of Canada and what that means for them. And then also how you know whether any country's marriage that is happening abroad is whether or not it's going to be recognized in Canada or not. And then we're going to talk about the same two things of consequences and recognition for non-Canadians who are getting married abroad. So we'll jump right into getting divorced outside of Canada. What are the consequences of a foreign divorce? There are two main consequences that are things you have to keep in mind if you're going to get a foreign divorce. And one is that it changes some of the ancillary rights that come along with the family law regime in Canada. So you might lose some of the corollary reliefs if your husband divorces you in another country. So if you also feel that the foreign divorce is improperly obtained for some reason or another, maybe you didn't have the opportunity to participate in it, for example, you have to go to court to try and set it aside. And if the court does set it aside, then you can bring your own divorce proceeding in Canada. And that's when you would apply for spousal support, division of property, etc. All of the types of rights that we discussed in previous sessions. The other thing that you have to think about when you think of getting a foreign divorce is that you really want to make sure you have your documentation in place, make sure that it's translated in English or French if that's not the original language of the country there, because you will need it if you ever want to remarry within Canada. We spoke before about one of the things that Canada looks at to know whether or not somebody is eligible to be married is if they're already married. So you need to make sure that you have proof of a valid divorce, even if that divorce was a foreign divorce, which is a divorce granted by a foreign country, before you can remarry within Canada. So how do you know whether or not a foreign divorce is going to be recognized in Canada? Is it just any country that writes on a piece of paper anything? No, there are certain ways, certain rules around it. So the first one is a residency requirement. So whether you or your spouse lived in that country for at least 1 year before you applied for the divorce. So notice it's not just the person who's asking for the divorce that has to live there, it's either or. Either person can live in that country. And it's for a year before you applied for the divorce, or the other person wouldn't have been the applicant. And then alternatively, if it's less than a year, this is when the second way it would kick in, is if the person who applied for the divorce, and now it's only the person who applied, can prove or have facts to show that they have a real and substantial connection with the country that granted the divorce. So what does real and substantial connection mean? It's a flexible test. It's not only these three things that are listed here, but these are just some of the examples. So they're originally from there before they came to Canada. They own land there. They spend a lot of time in the country. So these are some of the facts that they might say that I have a real connection to that country, even though I didn't live there for the last year before I was trying to get divorced. So we're going to do a couple of examples just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'll give everybody a minute to read it, and I'll read it out loud as well. Hussam and Yasmin live in Canada. Hussam went to his home country, Jordan, to get a divorce. The divorce was obtained in accordance with the law of Jordan. Yasmin did not know he was going to get a divorce. What are Yasmin's rights under Canadian law? So the first thing to ask yourself is the court even going to recognize the foreign divorce? So it's possible that it could, but there is strong facts to show that it's might be unlikely here. First, because Yasmin had no notice and was not able to participate in the process. So that was just a procedurally unfair way of getting divorced. And that's a pretty strong argument that Yasmin can go to the court and argue that it wasn't, she didn't have her fair process and procedure in order to participate in it. So that's a possible way that she can tell Canada to not recognize the foreign divorce. The second thing is, like we discussed, there's nothing in the facts here to say that Hussam has lived there for a year or more, neither did Yasmin. So he would have to now rely on having a real and substantial connection. So if he wasn't able to prove that, then the court is unlikely to recognize it. And then at that point, Yasmin would go and apply for divorce in Canada after she goes and asks the court to not recognize it. And along with her Canadian divorce, she can claim spousal support, division of property, etc. So here's another example. Omar marries Sarah in country X, then immigrates to Canada. They reside here in Canada while Sarah remains in country X. Omar obtains a divorce in country X where Sarah lives. Is the divorce granted by Sarah X recognized by Canadian law? So yes, it is, because Sarah is a resident in country X. And so she's living there. She's lived there for the past year before they were getting divorced. So Omar and Sarah become permanent residents in Canada. Then Omar takes up permanent residence in country X for a year. Sarah, the Canadian resident, goes to country X to obtain a divorce. Is this divorce granted by country X now recognized by Canadian law? So again, yes, it is, because now Omar is ordinarily resident in country X. So like I said before, it's either the person asking for the divorce or the person on the other side. If either one of them live in the country that's granting the divorce, then Canada is likely to recognize the foreign divorce. So here's another example. Omar and Sarah become permanent residents in Canada. Then 6 months later, Omar and Sarah obtain a divorce from their native country's consulate in Canada, which is considered legal in their native country. Is the divorce granted by their native country recognized by Canadian law? So this is really getting at whether or not, just because a divorce is legal according to another country, whether Canada is going to accept it here. Because when we talk about marriages, we're going to see that one of the requirements for recognizing a foreign marriage is that it's legal according to that country. So that's why this example is telling you that, you know, the divorce is done in a manner that is in line with their native country. So here it's maybe. So because neither Omar nor Sarah were residents in the native country for 1 year immediately preceding the divorce, it would only be recognized if either of them can show a real and substantial connection at the time of the divorce. Okay, so just a couple more. Omar and Selma are spouses who become permanent residents in Canada and then citizens. Now, several years later, Omar goes back to their native country X and he obtains a divorce and he remarries. Neither Omar nor Selma were residents in their native country X for a year preceding the divorce. However, Omar visited the native country a few times. Would that one be recognized by Canadian law? And it's unlikely because neither of them were residents there, and his visiting the native country a few times is not a real and substantial connection. Okay, so now that we talked about divorces abroad, we're going to talk about marriages that happen abroad. So if a Canadian is going to get married abroad, some of the consequences just to think about is that other countries might have laws that make you automatically a citizen of their country. So getting married abroad has no influence on your Canadian citizenship, but it might mean that other countries might no longer recognize your Canadian citizenship because they would now prioritize your citizenship of that country. So that could prevent the Canadian consulate from assisting you. It could also mean that now when you're a citizen of that other country, that now your spouse is allowed to impose some travel restrictions on either you or your children. So it is possible that your spouse could stop you from returning to Canada. And lastly, it's also possible that that country allows the spouses to keep possessions of your passport, even if you get divorced. So these are just certain things to know about, that certain countries have these automatic consequences of gaining citizenship, which happens automatically if you do get married to a citizen of that country. So how do you know whether or not a foreign marriage that you engage in abroad is going to be recognized in Canada? And the general rule for Canadians is that the eligibility of who can marry is determined by Canadian law, while the process of how you get married is determined by where you get married. So in general, the marriage must comply with both Canada's marriage law, which is who. So for example, under that falls under the condition that it can't be under 18, right? Or between 16 and 18, there needs to be parental consent, but basically the age. Under that also falls into same-sex marriage. Under that also falls into the prohibition against polygamy. Those are all things that are related to the identity of the person getting married. And those are all regulated by Canadian law. The marriage also has to comply with the laws of the place that's getting married with respect to how the marriage takes place. So this might be something like both people must be present in the same room, or maybe a proxy marriage is allowed. And a proxy marriage is one where you have somebody representing the spouse instead of the spouse themselves proceeding in the marriage. This also might mean how long the marriage might take place. Anything that you can think of about procedure-wise, if you think that this is about how to get married rather than who can get married, those are things that we look to the place where the marriage is actually taking place, right? So if the marriage that happens abroad is in compliance with the requirements of that locality, right, whichever other country, with respect to procedure, and it complies with Canadian law with respect to who can get married, then it will be recognized in Canada. So this is actually also just similar, just to, if you recall a couple of maybe weeks ago, we also spoke about how Canada's federal law, that defines who can get married. And then provincial law usually discusses how people can get married. So you can think of this almost as substituting the provincial law with the other state, if that's helpful at all. So just a little bit more about this is, so Canada's marriage law, for example, some more examples about who can get married, so, or who cannot really, is the prohibition against marrying relatives. And so relatives is either blood or adoption. It's not only blood relatives, and those are really close relatives. It's not very distant ones. So your mom, father, your grandparents, grandchilds, and they're all spelled out in the statute. So you don't have to guess about who's a relative and who isn't. And then how the marriage takes place. This depends on your circumstances and the country plan to get married in. So the way you know this information, which you really should know before you go there, is by contacting the embassy, high commission, or consulate of that country before you travel. That way you can make sure that you're in compliance with the laws of the place that you're going to get married. And just a side note, you don't have to perform the marriage at the Canadian consular office when you are abroad. Actually, you can't. They don't perform marriages and they don't attend marriages. So that's not the right way to approach it. You just have to make sure that you follow the rules of the country you're in, and the way you know those rules is by contacting the embassy of that country. And the consequence of it being recognized in Canada is you don't have to get remarried in Canada, right? So you don't have to register your marriage in Canada. So here's an example of Canadians getting married abroad. So Omar and Selma are 15 years old and they get married while outside of Canada, following all the rules of the country where their marriage took place. Are they married in the eyes of Canada? Give me just a second to think of it. And so no. And the reason is because they're 15 years old. And that goes to the rules about who can get married, and only Canada decides on the rules of who can get married. So if they don't have the capacity to get married, they're underage. Doesn't matter if that country says that 15-year-old individuals are allowed to get married. Those are things that Canada is going to look at to its own laws in order to know whether or not that foreign divorce is recognized in Canada. Jasmine and Mohammed are two Canadians, and both are eligible to marry under Canadian law. So they're of age, they're not already married, they're not relatives. Jasmine is not present at the marriage ceremony. However, her father represents her and attends the ceremony on her behalf. The country they are marrying in permits such marriage by proxy. So are they married according to Canadian law? And here we're going to say yes, it will be recognized by Canadian law. And we're going to talk a little bit more about proxy marriage when it comes to recognizing marriages for immigration sponsorship, because it's different over there. So the only reason that it is permitted here is because they're not applying to get sponsorship. Like one spouse is not sponsoring the other for a permanent residence status. They're already both Canadian, and they're just looking to see whether or not their marriage is recognized here. The consequences are to deal with family law, not immigration purposes. So now we're going to switch gears to talk about how non-Canadians, whether or not their foreign marriages would be recognized in Canada. But just to remember, so marrying a Canadian citizen doesn't give you Canadian citizenship automatically, right? It's not, in some countries, that is how it happens. That's not how Canada grants its citizenship. It doesn't happen just by marriage. And there isn't any special process to become a Canadian citizen just through marriage. You have to actually follow the same steps as everyone else of being physically present in the country for the same number of days during the same 5 years before the day of application. The way in which the spousal relationship kicks in and helps is that the Canadian spouse can sponsor you to become a permanent resident. And then after that, you can apply for citizenship. So in order for your Canadian spouse to sponsor you to become permanent resident, you would have to show the IRCC, the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, that the relationship is not entered into just for immigration reasons and is a genuine relationship, right? So there's going to be a lot of facts to show that you're actually entering into a real marital relationship. And then you also have to then show that you meet their requirements for a valid marriage, or if not, a common law partnership or a conjugal partnership. And we're going to go through and explain that last bullet in the next couple of slides. So how do you show the IRCC that it is a valid marriage, right? So they're the same rules, right? Canada's marriage law is going to say who can get married. The laws of the place say how it gets married. The thing to keep in mind here is that the marriage performed at a consular or embassy office, it must be legally recognized by the host state. So before, when we were talking about Canadians getting married abroad, we were saying that you don't have to do it at a Canadian embassy, nor can you really. Over here, it is possible that you do it at an embassy office, but it really depends on the country that you're in, right? So if France or Italy or whatever other country says that you're supposed to go to the embassy office in order to have the marriage ceremony be valid according to their laws, then that may be a requirement. So again, you would have to contact the embassy, high commissioner, or consulate of the country to really know how to get married. It's going to be very case specific, and similar consequences here. So let's say that you didn't, for some reason, you got a foreign marriage. However, you did not meet the laws of that country, right? Let's say that you either didn't have capacity. Maybe some countries say that the marriage is invalid based on who you're marrying, or maybe the marriage in an embassy is not recognized by the host country and you thought it was, and you went ahead and you did that. Maybe there's just a form of ceremony that's not permitted that you engaged in. If the marriage would otherwise be recognized in Canada, there are two ways to get around it. And the first is to try and remarry in another jurisdiction where their marriage would be legal. And the second is that if remarriage in another jurisdiction isn't feasible, and there is a genuine relationship between the sponsor and the applicant, they can try to be processed as either a common law partner or a conjugal partner. And so here, beforehand, we spoke about the definition of a common law partner in the family law regime to get certain family law rights. Those definitions for a common law partner are different when it comes to immigration law, right? So immigration law has its own definition of what is a common law spouse. And that definition is designed to know whether or not somebody can sponsor another individual for permanent residence. So the purpose of the definition is different. When we're talking in the family law definition of common law, it was so that upon separation, we would know whether or not they got support, certain kinds of support, right? Over here, we're talking to know whether or not a sufficient relationship exists, even if they're not married, to know that they can sponsor their partner for PR. And so it's sometimes people don't recognize that there's multiple definitions for the same term. And so I just wanted to flag that. So here, the definition is if you live together continuously in a conjugal relationship for at least 1 year at the time of submitting sponsorship or for the PR application. Right? And so what happens at this point is that you still have to remarry in Canada because you didn't have a valid marriage. So there is no real enforceable foreign marriage that can be enforced or recognized in Canada. However, in the immigration regime or immigration regulations, you may be able to meet this definition where it's possible that you try to get married abroad and you continue to live together. Maybe you thought you were married and you wouldn't call yourself a common law partner, but you can meet that definition in order to try and get the application to go through. And so there are just a couple of other conditions besides the validity of the actual marriage that happens abroad to know whether or not a spouse can sponsor a PR, and they deal with the marriage. So we're going to talk about them. The first is time, the timing of the marriage. The second is the age, and then the third is physical presence. So timing of the marriage. They must be married before submitting the application, right? And when I say married here, it's married or common law partners, right? And we already said it has to be a year. So the only alternative is if they're not married, they must be common law partners. But there's no provision for fiancés or intended common law partners. So if you intend to marry somebody or if you intend to live with somebody, you can't submit your application just yet. This is because the expectation is that a Canadian or a permanent resident and a foreign national they're going to get married or live together before they submit their immigration applications. The second is the age. So we spoke before about how in Canada, it's possible for somebody to get married if they're 17 years old in some places, right? If they have their parental consent. However, when it comes to immigration law, both spouses must be at least 18 at the time of submitting their sponsorship application for the marriage to be recognized for immigration purposes. So that means that the marriage might be legally valid when and where it took place, but they won't be considered members of the family class for immigration purposes. And so the family class is a term that's heavily used in the sponsorship process. And so that's what defines whether or not somebody is eligible for sponsorship. So once the underage spouse turns 18, they can be considered to be a member of the family class, even if they married at a younger age. So it's not invalidating the marriage entirely. It's just saying you can't apply just yet. Right? So for example, a person who was married at 16 is eligible to be sponsored whenever they turn 18. And the last one, the last thing to keep in mind about foreign marriages for immigration purposes is the requirement of physical presence. And so previously, these rules were different. Right now, any applications that came in after 2015 of June the 11th, if one or both parties are not physically present, then that relationship is excluded from any immigration program. So that means that both the sponsor and the applicant spouse, they both have to have participated in a wedding ceremony in person. So this requirement precludes people who got married either through a proxy marriage or through a phone or internet marriage. We know that a lot of people, especially during COVID, have been engaging in these kinds of marriages. Different countries, aside from Canada, like some states in the US, have started accepting these types of marriages, but Canada, for immigration purposes, doesn't matter about COVID or other excuses. The only exception is for those in the army forces, and there's specific rules around that. In general, most people are precluded from trying to come to Canada if their marriage was done through a proxy marriage or a phone or internet marriage. And this is really to protect victims of forced marriages, right? The idea behind this policy is that when people are physically present at marriage, there's less risk of compelled relationships. So just the caveat there is that, let's say you got married by proxy by proxy marriage, right? So that's when you have, for example, your father there instead of yourself at the wedding ceremony, and he represents you. And that's something that happens in some countries. So if you were living together with your spouse, again, just because you call yourself married doesn't mean you have to apply as married, right? You can have your relationship assessed as a common law partner, and you can be sponsored that way. So I'm going to do a couple more examples. So here, Jasmine is Canadian and Muhammad is not Canadian. They are both eligible to marry under Canadian law. Again, they're of age, they're not related, and they're both single. Jasmine is not present at the marriage ceremony, but her father represents her and attends the ceremony on her behalf. The country they are marrying in permits such marriage by proxy. Is Jasmine able to sponsor Muhammad for PR status? And so no, because Canada's immigration department does not recognize virtual or proxy marriages for family class sponsorship. Again, the caveat there is, let's say that they were living together, they can try and apply as common law spouses instead of married spouses. Just a note about polygamous relationships. So if you married in a country where polygamy is legal, only one marriage may be recognized for immigration purposes. So again, when we look at the definition of a family class for sponsorship purposes, a spouse is not a member of the family class if that spouse or sponsor was already married to another person at the time of the subsequent marriage. So it just excludes it from the definition of a spouse. So what's the solution? The first marriage that that likely the husband had entered into, it can be recognized as a legally valid marriage under Canadian law if the polygamous marriage is converted into one of monogamy, right? And so even though the department cannot require divorce and remarriage, officers can ask for evidence that you converted your marriage into one that is just one man and one woman, right? So that means that you can get divorced from your second spouse, for example, and prove through a divorce order that you are now only in a monogamous relationship. So that is how you can convert it. However, you cannot convert like the second marriage, for example, right? So you can only do the first one. So if a husband wishes to sponsor a wife other than his first as his spouse, he must divorce his other wives and then remarry the chosen wife in a form of marriage that is recognized as valid in Canada. So if a sponsor and applicant were practicing polygamy and they have children from several spouses, some of the consequences that kick in is that, let's say the first relationship was converted into one that's valid in Canada, the other spouses are not going to be eligible for immigration to Canada through those the children that spouse may have had from them. So if the children are sponsored, and if one of these children subsequently sponsors their respective mother, she will have no spousal status, and she won't be eligible for support or other benefits that flow from that marriage under Canadian law. So it's really severing a relationship. And one important point is that the prohibition against polygamy cannot be avoided by processing a second spouse as a common law partner. By definition, a common law partner is a union between one person and another person, so two people. So an existing marriage is a barrier to establishing that the second spouse is a common law partner. And the second spouse would be considered as single in law, and they would have to remarry to be considered married under Canadian law. So, however, if the first wife is divorced or deceased, then the husband and second wife could choose to remarry, right? Because that second wife is single, or they might meet the definition of a common law partner at that point if they live together for a year after the separation of or the death of the first wife. I know that was a lot of information thrown at you, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we received, thank you so much, Lena, for all those information. We received some questions. So the first question is, if someone is in Canada and has a valid work permit, and currently her sponsorship application is in process. In the event of a divorce, can her spouse cancel her sponsorship application? The person has an infant daughter who is Canadian national, and the marriage happened in Canada. The marriage was held in Canada.
Yeah, I think that's a question that needs to be addressed to an immigration lawyer. However, I don't think so. Unfortunately, I can't really give more information than that. But I do not think that the status would terminate after you now have a connection to the country of Canada. It's something that would definitely need some advice, though.
Yeah. Okay. The second question is, sorry. The second question is, do we have cases when a person marry for immigration and then wants to divorce after getting citizenship?
Yeah, I think that is one of the ways in which it informs the facts, and it helps people recognize and identify fake marriages, right? Or those marriages that are motivated for immigration. And I think you hear less and less of them now. But for sure, it's something that may still happen. As with any system, people slip through cracks, right? But it's not a very it's not a very reliable way of getting sponsorship, because the officials are usually very good at identifying when it is not a genuine relationship and when it's merely for immigration purposes.
Okay, those are the questions have been sent to me. Aishigal, do you have any questions been sent to you?
There's no question on the chat right now, but yeah.
Yeah, the floor is open for any question. You can just simply unmute yourself and ask the question. So I have another one. It's just been sent. Okay, I came in Canada in 2015 based on spousal sponsorship by my wife, where we got married in back home in Pakistan in 2013. But I'm still on PR currently because I didn't I didn't have a chance to pursue my citizenship because of my official engagement. We have a daughter of 18 months old, as my wife is asking for separation. So, okay.
I don't think I understood what the official engagement is.
Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question or provide some clarification, or you can just send me?
This is Asim here. Hi everybody. So Assalamu alaikum. So
Walaikum salam.
I'm asking about this question because as I wrote how I came in Canada. So now I'm in the crisis like my wife is separation, and we have a daughter. Now the situation is that I'm the only for a couple of years.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I think you're cutting out. Do you mind repeating?
I was qualified for citizenship. I didn't get chance to pursue my citizenship because of certain reasons of my official busyness and everything. But I'm on PR currently. But after she's asking, and once we status can I pursue my citizenship after that? What happened once that separated, and what the authorities' actions are on my PR status?
So I don't think there's anything preventing you from applying to become a citizenship as long as you have met the number of days that you are in Canada, and you were a PR or a temporary resident or any other type, like a protected individual, right? So if you have resided in Canada for those, I think it's 1,095 days or so in the past 5 years, I don't think that the potential separation with your spouse or wife would preclude you from applying to citizenship.
She's
Is that
sponsoring
answer
me,
the question?
though she's sponsoring me regardless, because she is trying every entity to make I show to the authorities that she wants me now, basically. So
Right.
that's why she's trying her best to do all this stuff. But whatever she's delivering false statements to the authorities to make it done. But that can be proved. My lawyers are working on it. But the situation is that what will be my decisions are based on several factors, right? Because I need to plan everything accordingly. I have a daughter and everything. So I need to take a bold step at this point, like whether I'd be living here or should I'd be leaving the country. So I'm attending this session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it
So
sounds like you have some legal representation, so that's really great to hear.
I will definitely discuss with my lawyer properly. But there is one more caveat over here. Like I know that the government will definitely come. She will definitely pursue the divorce afterwards after the civil separation period. I know that. That's why she's doing all that stuff. But as for the Sharia, I know that we have our own boundaries of it. That will be that as per the religion perspective view as well. We have to pursue a different way to get out of this relationship, or she wants to get out of this relationship through Sharia way.
Okay. Yeah. I think I understood your question in general. I just want you to keep in mind that if you're a permanent resident, right? I know you haven't become a citizen yet, but even PR, you generally cannot lose your status or be deported or removed just because you're separated. That's
Okay.
that's not the general rule, right? Of course, there's always exceptions. But you're protected once you're a PR in general, even if your spouse did sponsor you, right?
Okay.
And the sponsors are still financially responsible, right? Even if the relationship breaks down for a total of 3 years, right? It's even though she wants to separate you, she signed on to be financially responsible for you, and then so that still has to continue even if the separation does continue. So
Okay, she's depending upon me, so I'm I'm getting a little off here as well because she's completely dependent on me because I
Mhm.
was earning good and still I'm earning good, so I made her sit as a homemaker. And though it's not only my choice, she also wanted to be a homemaker, so she stayed home. So I was there for all these years earning for us and feeding us, and we have a house and everything. I built everything from the scratch. Now everything is shedding apart. So I'm the only kin over here from my side of us. Everyone here are
Mhm.
brothers and everyone. So they all are plotting everything against me, and they're all selling my house and everything, rectify all the assets,
Okay.
everything. Get it. So she's just delivering all the statements to the authorities to make a strong case that she can win, and she's delivering all the false statements and this and that. She's not allowing me to meet my daughter as well, as I discussed maybe in our last session as well, if you remember. So besides of that, I just wanted to know that besides that, yeah, she now I got the answer. She's gonna kick me out from the country as I'm maintaining my status properly. And where this is the first time I came into the law enforcement. It's like people are asking me throughout my in my age. Like I haven't been through any of this. I haven't faced any of such circumstances. Besides the fact, and now I'm clear that she cannot kick me out. First thing first, because I need to stay here for my daughter. I need to take care of her, regardless whatever right I have. I need to give. I need to like raise her in a good arms, and I need to fulfill all her needs. So that I will do for sure. First, secondly, that if she when we get divorced, as per the Canadian law, whatever it is, you get the divorce certificate and everything. But I know that that is not enough for our Sharia in the eyes of the Sharia. So I need to get separated religiously from her as well. So what will the implications? I need to communicate someone from the Muslim society to get out of this marriage as well with her, right?
Mhm. Right. So I don't think I understood the full question at the end. So you're saying that the Canadian divorce is unlikely to be recognized abroad?
No, not abroad. In the eyes of the religion. That's what I wanted to know.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. So yeah, there's a lot of I think that requires some religious advice, right? I think
Yes.
it necessitates you to
Because
seek
in
advice.
my eyes, if we get the divorce certificate, I don't consider that to be a divorce. As a Muslim practitioner, I need,
Mhm.
because we got bounded in this relationship as a Muslim, that we have married as per the Muslim rules and regulations, where we have accepted each other. Now if the government of Canada says you are divorced, you get the divorce certificates, and you can go your own ways. But according to me, because we bounded in a relationship as per our religion, we should get out
Mhm.
of this religion as per the religion as well, right? So
Right.
that's why I'm asking
Yeah,
that.
I see what you're saying. I don't think that it's my practice area or
Okay.
jurisdiction to really tell you
Mhm.
about, and guide you about those moral consequences that you're facing. But typically, imams in the community are used to handling these kinds of scenarios. So I think if you approach, you know, potentially and most beneficial, if you can
Mhm.
approach somebody that both you and your spouse would listen to, recognize, and uh, agree to, then that's the most
I'm trying my
feasible
level
way of
best
getting out of this, right? Because
to
there
reach out
are
to the muftis. Yes, I'm trying my level best to reach out to the muftis in here, back home, to get a solid answer. Like what will be in my situation, what will be the best solution for this problem, and what
Mhm,
is the best way? Because I know as per law, because we are living in this country and we have to put the law of this country as well, which we are doing. And that's how she is after the divorce. That's how she's after the divorce as in this country by the law of this country. But according to me, okay, I obey the law as well. I respect it, but I respect more my religion rather than the wherever I'm living, right? So
mhm,
if it is a Muslim country, if we are in back from Pakistan, that would be an easy way to get sorted out of everything because that's a Muslim country. But we are living here where multiculturalism is practicing, and we want to follow. I want to follow the Muslim religious way, so that's why I'm asking all these questions.
Right. Yeah, I think my advice would still be to have, it's one thing if you're going to seek advice of different religious scholars. It's another thing if you can try and find a mutually agreed upon, religious leader that can guide you through this process, because then you're more likely to get mutually beneficial and something that both sides are going to actually listen to. Right.
Okay. Or is there any community, or is there any house of Muslim which can or the community in Muslim, because I'm living in Milton, so who can educate both of us, this is the way, a proper way, and these are the rights of your children as well, because I know that, because I've been reading a lot, and I know because I'm in touch with muftis a lot as well. So they're telling me that if your spouse is asking a separation and you are paying you're taking care of your children financially, you're paying all the bills and everything, you're taking care of them. So if your wife is getting married to somewhere else, rather in the future, so you will get the custody of your children. So yeah, so I know that. But I want to make it official. So is there any community who can make it official so that the Canadian government will also understand the situation in terms of our religion?
So as we discussed in previous
Yes.
weeks, there are ways that you can make those types of arrangements through contracts, right? Private contracts.
Okay.
So there's different types of domestic contracts, and you can stipulate different things in them to help try and regulate your affairs after separation. If you're looking for a specific community-led entity, perhaps reach out to the Canadian Council of Imams. It's really important to try and get your religious advice and leadership from somebody who understands the country, right?
Can I have some contact numbers here so that I can reach out to him, or I can leave my email address with Sister Wissam, so she can provide me some information, or I can leave my email address to you as well over the private chat, and so that you can provide me information about these are the imams who have a word or sound in the eyes of the citizenship of Canada, or ICRs, whatever it is, authorities in the Canada who can listen to them and can make a proper solution in the eyes of the religion, so that everything goes smoothly.
Yeah, I personally don't have those contacts, but that's why I was suggesting if you reach out to the entity, the Canadian Council of Imams, they're the umbrella organization that I know of. There might be others that perhaps they might be able to direct you to somebody who can more directly help you. Because unfortunately, I don't have a specific person in mind to direct you to.
What is it called? Canadian Council something? What is it?
Of Imams.
Canadian Council of Imams. Okay, got you. I will try someone to get hold on.
And Wissam, if you have any input on this, this is off the top of my head.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this information. I can invite Uzma. She has some information. She asked that question, or someone asked her before. She has some information. Uzma, if you can contribute a little bit.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you so much, Wissam. And Lina, thank you for the detailed answer. And to the brother who is asking this, I was working with one of the ex-wife of a person who was asking the same question, that whether it's an Islamic divorce or not, and somebody like the husband was bothering her. So a similar case like you are discussing. And the Imam of Toronto and Imam of Cambridge that I contacted, and they said that it should be considered Islamically divorced, no matter somebody is here in Canada or back home anywhere else in Pakistan or any other country, because the wife is not interested in living with the spouse. So that should be done decently. And the problem with, of course, the marriages that do not work, the mediation is not done easily, and that's why the couple does not come to a point where they can create a contract like Lina was mentioning. So the Imam did say that it is considered Islamically, because while you're living here, whether your marriage took place in some other country, in the Canadian system and Islamically, once you are you have taken the divorce, it is considered divorce, whether the husband or wife take Islamically or not.
Okay, so it will consider a proper divorce either way in the eyes of the religion. It means that.
Yes, this is what he said. And because some of the women in the past, they have been suffering, and it's not that I am in support of the women. Of course, men do suffer too, and it
Yeah.
could be in any side. So the other person or the spouse, they don't easily give divorce Islamically, and they want the spouse to suffer. So that is why the system is like this. And unfortunately, the Canadian government is not going to do anything, nor they listen for the religious divorce. It's the
Yes.
Canadian system.
Yeah, because I'm been suffering a lot. My wife is not allowing my child to see me. I haven't seen my daughter for like 3 months and over. So yeah, I'm really missing her. So I need to know because she brought up here for 20 years. So I'm here for just for 6-7 years. So she knows all the rules and regulation around the system, and she's using it against me because I've been busy working hard for like feeding my family all through these years. So I didn't pay attention because I'm not such kind of guy. But now I'm bounded into the legal system, so I'm like experiencing all this type of stuff. So thank you so much, sister. But yeah, I need a proper legal advice where
Yeah.
which can be which should be get educated to my the wife as well, so that she will understand all the proper procedures of Islamic ways. And like she's not allowing me to see my daughter. She's asking money for my daughter. I'm willing to pay everything, but at least once in a week, I need to see my daughter so that I can meet her. At least because I know that she's so young, she needs mother's attention rather than a father. I do agree with all that. I need to let her go if she doesn't want to live with me
Yeah,
smoothly. But
sure. Brother, I'll just stop myself here because I know Lina and Islam has a lot to share. But I think the system is very fair in Canada, and the social workers do work on the situation that you are going through. Please get in touch with Wissam. I can share some links and information, and that will be helpful for you.
thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, sister.
Uzma, you've been asked also to provide the information of that imam because like someone was asking that they have the same issue and they need to have a conversation with that
Yes, sure.
imam.
Sure.
If you
I will
can write it in the chat, that would be great.
sure.
At least
I
the
will.
name of the imam, which
Yes.
masjid.
Right. I will find the email and I will write it in the message.
Okay. Thank you so much. Lina, have you read the question in the chat?
Yeah, we have 2 more questions on the chat. I can read it for you now. If the custody is mine, can my ex-husband apply for them?
Yes. As long, right, it's always what's in the best interest of the child, and we're going to talk a lot about that next week. But the short answer to this question is yes. The previous husband can apply for custody of children. Custody can change. It doesn't have to stick to what it started out as. So just because it's currently yours doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to stay. And you don't have to remain married. And it's very frequent that ex-husbands do have custody of children. So we'll go through a lot of examples with that next week.
Thank you. And the other question from the same people, how can I know if my ex-husbands apply for the kids for citizenship because he refused to give any information, and I called the immigration and they refused to give me any information?
That's a new scenario. I would imagine that as the mother of children, you have the right to know all information, include about the your children's citizenship status, and whether or not your husband applied for their citizenship. Perhaps get in touch with your MP. They might be able to, they sometimes are able to give you some more information about status of your applications when it comes to immigration. And they're sometimes very helpful in helping you navigate the system if you're saying that you called and they refuse to give you information. I think I would go to, that's what I would do. I'd go to my MP and explain how I'm unable to communicate efficiently and get the information that you're entitled to. MP, your member of parliament. So your MP is the person who represents you at a federal level. So you have your MPP, which is your provincial representative, and then you have your MP. So if you Google perhaps your riding, and you can find your member of parliament that way.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Is there any other question?
Thank you, Uzma, for providing information. It's in the chat box if you want to have a look on that. Yeah. Do you have any more questions for Lina? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you for the very informative session. There was a lot of information today. Yeah, and next week the session will be around children custody. It's going to be next same time, same day of the week. It's going to be next Wednesday at 5:30. Please register for that session if you didn't until now. And thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you, Lina.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes, I'm in need of duas for me.
Sorry?
I'm in need of duas. Please pray for me and my daughters, please. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
We'll keep you in our
Jazakallah
thought.
khair. Jazakallah
Inshallah.
khair.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum.